Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We are EBS, your experienced technology partner, and we have been in business for over 45 years. We specialize in the deployment of Sage Business Management and Microsoft solutions, managed services, and secure on-premises and cloud-based infrastructure. My name is Darren Tolley, and I am one of the account managers here at EBS. Today, we're joined by Sicon, who we've partnered with for many years. Sicon are a Tech Partner Plus, a Sage Tech Partner Plus, I should say, and provide a wide range of innovative solutions for Sage 200. I would like to extend a warm welcome to Chris Donlan, our Partner Account Manager. Good morning. Who will give us an overview of the document automation and invoice approval solutions, which are fully immersed within Sage 200 Professional. We are recording today's presentation and will make this available to you in the next few days. There are lots of recordings on our YouTube channel. Remember to hit subscribe to receive notifications when we load new videos. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, or there will be an opportunity at the end of the presentation in the Q&A session. So that's more than enough from me. I'll pass you over to Chris. Morning, Chris.
Hiya, Darren. Nice to see you again. And good morning, everybody from me. I'm just going to start by sharing my screen over here, and I will take my camera off once we get underway. Otherwise it's a distraction. So what I'm hoping you're looking at right now is the Sicon website. This is a totally public facing site, sicon.co.uk. So please do feel free to go there and immerse yourself into having a look around the different products that we have, and I'm just going to showcase that now. So as Darren said, we're a Sage Tech Partner. We only develop products for Sage 200. So there are other flavors of Sage out there. There are other ERP solutions, but we have, for 25 years now, have nailed our colors to that mast. So all of these products that you're looking at in this display will not work at all without Sage 200 being on your server. Okay. I think that gives us a bit of a USP because, as you'll see when we get into the demo, the products have a very similar look and feel in the Sage environment, and the way our web portal communicates with that environment is very seamless. So there's no synchronization, no end of day update. Everything is working real time. We're going to focus our energy today on these products here that I'm highlighting: documents, document automation, and over here to the right from the approval portfolio, we're going to have a look at invoice approval. And all these three elements are all designed to work with each other. They can work individually, of course, but the more you buy into, the more feature set you'll bring into your business. If you do click on one of the options to go into more detail, you've got access into what we call the helping user guide, which effectively is the manual for that particular module. And you've also got access into an equivalent YouTube video channel on the back of what Darren was mentioning there. So click on any of the products you see here, and you can then have another opportunity to watch a demonstration of that product. Okay, let's get underway with having a look around. Now, this is my Sage demo environment. My Sage 200 menu is going to look very busy because, as you might imagine, I've got all of the Sicon products switched on. But that said, when you click onto an option that you've bought into, I suppose the immediate thing you realize is that it has the same look and feel, the same navigation. And again, that is the dependency that we have on the Sage 200 model. Okay, so we like to think that the onboarding process is going to be very quick. So document automation is an add-on onto the platform product that we call Sicon Documents. So what's that all about? So let me take you into an account here. We're going to be using this record a bit later, so might as well draw attention to it now. Sicon Documents will add these two buttons that you see me hovering over at the bottom of your screen. Okay, not just this screen, but every single screen on your Sage system. So that means I'm talking sales, purchase, nominal, cash books, stock, sales orders, purchase orders, including any potential products that you might buy in from the Sicon portfolio that sit on the Sage menu. So this license comes in two flavors. You can either be an add and view user, or you can just be someone that can view whatever's attached to any of the transactions that you might click on. So for example, here, if I click on view documents, then I'm shown effectively what the image of the invoice looks like when it was originally presented. And this could come in through document automation, and you could email it to either someone internally or externally if you feel the need to do that. Okay. Or you can literally drag and drop anything you like onto that add docs button. Now, it's not just for PDF, JPEG or PNG files, it's also Excel, Word. You could even drag and drop an email onto that add docs button. And that might be useful because if you've been engaging in a piece of dialogue, let's say with this supplier about this particular invoice, then it'd be quite useful to be able to have a thread that you can easily read that is embedded into your Sage system without having to go back to Outlook to find it. Okay, so that's the purpose of it. It's effectively a digital filing cabinet. Okay, and as I say, this will be on every single screen in your Sage system. Now, it is licensed by named user, so not necessarily everyone on your Sage system needs to have that mechanism. So have a think about what the impact of that might be. Do I want add and view for a handful of people? Do I want view only for others? Do I need it for everybody, I suppose, is a consideration. Okay. So let's have a look, excuse me, at automation. I'm going to come back to a point about Sicon documents I want to cover off, but I'll cover that later. So document automation is a means by which you can allow a piece of AI technology to scan across an invoice image, okay, and it will then place that image eventually onto your Sage environment as a transaction, and it will also associate the image with that transaction almost completely hands-free, okay. And it can run in two ways, and I'm going to show you both of those. The first one, if I pop into process invoices and credit notes, when you set this up, or when EBS set it up, shall I say, then when somebody comes in here and clicks load documents, what that can be excuse me, arranged to do is to look at a dedicated email account on your Outlook Exchange server. So let's, for example, call it ebsinvoices.co.uk. Okay, and if you then arrange for your suppliers to email their invoices and credit notes to that inbox, then when somebody comes in here and clicks load, then whatever's in that box when they press that button will be revealed into this display screen that you're looking at with me now. And if an hour later you click load again, it will load again whatever's in that inbox from the last time that you clicked load. You can set it up to auto download. So if you want it to be cyclical every hour, then that's what it will do. So if I just focus on a couple of these examples and show you how we get them into Sage. So this one here, this is a trained image, okay, and I'm just going to talk about this briefly because it's quite important. It is mandatory. It's no easy way of getting out of this, but hopefully when you appreciate the simplicity of it, it'll be, you know, you can take it on board quite quickly. So when I first showed this image to Document Automation, it has an inbuilt piece of AI whose job it is to identify who the supplier is. So let me just take you into training for a second and we can put that into context. So the system won't just look at a name or an address, okay, because that might not necessarily be unique. So you could have a number of accounts called Smith and Son, for example. You could have a number of businesses operating out of a building in a street in a town. So again, that's not really unique enough for us to latch on to who that account might be. So what we look for is three letters that could be anywhere on the graphic of this invoice image, and we're looking for VAT. Okay, so if you have your VAT numbers, as you might well do, embedded onto your supplier records in Sage, then what the AI will do is look for the sequence and then go and find that number in your accounting system, and it will eventually come back with a hit on an account, and in this case it will have found Kitchen Builders. It will also look to see what the type of document it is, so it will ascertain whether it's an invoice or a credit note, for example, but that's where the connection then ends. You will then have an obligation to assist in effectively pointing out where some of the key elements that form a invoice transaction onto the ledger, where they actually sit on this document. So for me, when I first came to train this image, I'm not concerned about what the vocabulary says here. So that might say IMVNO, or it might say DocRef, or this might say tax point, but the relevance of what's either underneath it or alongside it, as per this example, this is what we're interested in. So what I did was click on this field here. I looked then down this label list, okay, and I clicked on the appropriate field name that best serves the relationship with this piece of data. So for me, I just clicked on invoice number. Then I clicked on this field here and clicked invoice date. Then I wandered down the screen. Bearing in mind, by the way, this is an invoice coming directly onto the ledger, so there's no PO in this on this particular example. So there's only 5 pieces of data that you fill in on a screen at the moment that Sage needs to actually form an invoice transaction, and we're now going to look at the final 3. This is my net, this is my tax, and this figure here is going to be my total value. Okay, we can allow, as you can see, for things like carriage if that's relevant, but that then becomes a trained image. So even on the first day you start using this, if you had, I don't know, 3-4 invoices from Kitchen Builders coming into your screen, you would only need to train the first one for the system to immediately be in a position to update its understanding of how to process the other 2 or 3. It's that quick. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this particular invoice, and you can tick as many as apply in this particular situation, is I'm going to put a tick on here, and you'll notice now that there's 2 options at the bottom of the screen. One's called Process Automatic, the other one's called Manual. Process Automatic means that you are in principle happy for this invoice to be posted to the default nominal that may be sat on that supplier record inside your Sage system. Okay, so on this occasion I'm going to say okay, Process Automatic, and that, as you know, has been completed. That invoice is now sat on that Kitchen Builders account. However, what we're going to be moving on to a little bit later is the invoice has been flagged as being unapproved. Okay, it will have a flag on it, which I'll show you in a second, and that means that a notification has already been sent to the appropriate workflow route for people to now engage with deciding whether they are happy for that invoice to be approved, which means subsequently it can then be paid in due course. Okay, but whilst it has this U flag, as we call it, which I'll evidence for you shortly, then it cannot be paid. You would not even be in a position to manually pick that up and pay it without, you know, necessarily going through a full payment run. Okay, so it's quite a block. Okay, but a good block, obviously. But we'll get to that subject shortly. This one for Falcon, which is also, as you can see, just a invoice coming onto the purchase ledger. This one I'm going to do a manual approach so you can appreciate the difference. Now I could again tick as many of these validated invoices that I need to treat in this arrangement. So when I click Process Manual, what you'll see happening here is I'm actually taken into the Sage screen, which is my direct ledger transaction entry screen over here on the left hand side, complemented by the graphic over here on the right, which means I can have a relationship between the two screens at the same time. And what I'm now going to be in a position to do is choose where I want this invoice to be coded to. It's offering me the default because that's what's on that account. But of course, what I can do is change this to, let's just pick something different. Okay. And of course, I could split it if required to different nominals, different cost centers, and associate the relevant value. But what you'll see over here is that all the related fields that of course are coming from this image have already been populated courtesy of OCR automation. So once I've got my requirement here, I click save. What you would also see down here at the bottom, if I clicked say 7, 10 entries, that would now be finishing number 1, and then it would say 2 of 10, 3 of 10, 4 of 10, and so on until I finish that sequence. Okay, so let's do that. That invoice is also on the Falcon account now, and again, like Kitchen Builders, it's been flagged with a code U on the transaction, and the relevant notification has gone out to the appropriate approver or workflow route that that invoice will need to go on. So let's just look at the evidence of that before I show you the next method by which you can get documents transcribed by automation. So if we look at the excuse me, Falcon account, for example, let me just double click onto that and show you what's emerged on the other side. So this is the transaction that I literally posted through, and there's that code U flag that I talked about. Now you probably may be familiar with using query flags. So for example, if I want to put H for hold, D for dispute, Q for query, okay, that's fine, but I can easily step back in here, as you can see, and remove it. Okay, but what I cannot do is I cannot either A, enter a U flag by myself, or B, I can't get rid of that U flag. The only way that U flag is going to get removed is when you'll see a bit later through the session when we go into invoice approval, and the relevant number of approvers that might need to be associated with that process condone the thing to be released. Okay, so like this one here, for example. Okay, so that is an invoice that's had an approval process run across it. Okay, and I know I can pay it. But at any time, whilst I'm waiting for that flag to be removed, I can still click on View Documents and look at the image of the invoice. Okay, as we did right at the beginning. And I can continue to add more documents or images or spreadsheets or emails onto that Add Docs button whilst we're waiting for that U flag to be extinguished. Okay. Now, the other way, and both of these methods, by the way, can work side by side. So if you've got suppliers that don't want to send it to your general inbox address, or they forget and they still send them to people within the company who may work in the finance department, for example, then what we can do here is we can go to a method which we call document drop. Okay, and if I just bring up my Windows Explorer screen, so imagine this is my email display, okay, my private email display. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to highlight attachments from what could be 4, 5, 6, 10 emails at the same time. And I'm literally going to drag it and drop it onto the relevant button here. Now, if you pick a bunch of invoices and credit notes at the same time, then drop them onto this dual purpose screen here that I'm highlighting. Let me just get rid of that, and I'll go back and explain to you what I've actually dropped there. Two of the points that you may want to think about is if you get your customers to send their purchase orders into you for what they want to buy, so we're talking here about obviously stock that you sell, then we can flip that purchase order and place it onto your Sage system as a sales order and attach their purchase order image to that. So again, users of documents can then see those attachments, okay, and it will remain with that sales order even when you fulfill it. And I've just seen something come through on the chat, and we'll talk about that shortly. The other thing that we've just recently added is the ability for customers to send you their remittance when they pay you, okay, and we can then look down the content of that remittance and we can then allocate it to the relevant lines on their account, which are obviously invoices that they are now settling, okay, and then we can put the total value of the remittance onto the record in Sage, onto their sales ledger account, and we can put it into the bank at the same time. Okay, so again, that's something else that, and we're probably going to continue adding different levels of functionality to OCR as the months evolve. Okay, so what I actually did there was I dragged and dropped an invoice that in actual fact had a relationship to a purchase order. Okay, so when I go back into process invoices and credit notes, okay, then when I click load, of course, what that will do is read the invoice, excuse me, from whatever's arrived in the normal inbox email. And by the way, those inbox emails, if you've got multiple companies on your Sage system, then you will have to have an inbox for each company. Okay, as you might appreciate. So when you go into that Sage company and you go into automation and you click load, then we're obviously looking at the relevant inbox to bring the invoices onto the appropriate company. So this is the record that I actually brought in. So when I trained this, okay, and in part this might help the question I saw quickly that emerged into the chat. So a slight change, obviously, with this being relevant to a PO, in as much as I would have highlighted where the appearance of the PO number is quoted on the invoice, and then likewise, I clicked it here. Now, if this invoice is relevant to a, or has, shall I say, multiple purchase order references on it, albeit they are contained within one invoice, then I would expect to see some way of me being able to reference the PO at what we call line level. Okay, so here's an example of that. So what I did here was I hit on the description and did a line description. I then also clicked on the unit cost. Okay, or actually it's this one here. And then I clicked on unit and clicked line quantity, and then finally my extension, okay, which is the line net value here. You'll notice how there are a number of other variables that you can include into that mix, things like percentage discount, value discount, and also line order number. So if, again, as I said, if you've got multiple POs being quoted on a single invoice, then all you need to do is train a line or 2 or 3 lines for the system to understand how to then go down what might be a 2, 3, 4 page invoice, okay, making sure it's happy to reconcile everything on the back of it, okay. And there will obviously still be a need for you to complete what we call the trailer area, which is the total net of the invoice, the VAT and the gross, okay. Now you can do this line level, okay, on an invoice only. It doesn't have to be a purchase order. So all again, as I say, if you want to be able to put in some description or a stock code, as well as a description and the quantity and the cost, then do feel free to do that, because what that then may mean is that you can then appropriate that to a different nominal code. But in order to achieve that, because the supplier isn't going to quote their nominal or your nominal on their invoice, okay, then there would probably be a need for you to click on process manually, okay, if you needed to appropriate any of these lines to different nominal accounts rather than use the default that is on the supplier record. Okay, so I'm hoping in part that might have answered that question, but if we need to discuss it a bit further towards the end of the session, then we can. Okay, a couple of things more before I leave this area, and we're going to have a look at the approval side. Occasionally, you'll see it saying needs attention. Okay, now in this particular example here, it's telling me, well, hang on a second, I've looked at this account for Barry Training, and you've already got an invoice on that record already for 620 for £500. Okay, so the system is acting like a gatekeeper, and it's saying, well, this looks to me like a duplicate. Okay, now if this invoice had come in through the email route rather than me dragging and dropping it, okay, then I could now engage in a bit of email dialogue with the sender of that document to say, look, this, you sent me this, we've already had this invoice, you know, is this your error? Have you quoted the wrong number? But what I can then do is I can delete it off this waiting list, or this preview pane as we call it. Okay, so no risk of that invoice actually going onto my account again. I could force it, okay, but it would Sage doesn't even like things with duplicate reference numbers on, so you know, you'd have to sort of give that some thought if you did want that to go onto the system. Final point about POs is if you want to make sure that the PO is receipted, okay, so that when the invoice comes in from automation, we can actually compare the quantities being shown on the invoices against the receipted quantities that you've already made on that PO. We can also look at making sure that the price that you're being charged at line level on the invoice agrees with what you originally raised on your PO. There are tolerances, I will point that out, that you can ask automation to observe. So if you raise a PO for £1, for example, and the invoice comes in at £1.05 each, then if that falls within a tolerance percentage or amount, then it won't get queried. It will happily reference that invoice against that PO. So quite a lot to sort of think about and consider, but EBS, of course, are very expert in this arena. They can, you know, acquaint you with those things, those consideration points when they set it up, so it works in exactly the manner that you're going to be looking for. Okay, so let's pop out and look at now what's happened to those invoices that we've placed onto the ledger, and this will give me an opportunity to talk about invoice approval. So I'm going to step onto here, and the first thing you'll clearly appreciate is the fact that I'm now in a web portal. Okay, so people who use Sicon Approvals do not need to be Sage users. They could be, but they don't have to be. Okay, and that's quite important, because if you're reaching out to a much broader you know, employee base, okay, than you normally have licenses for to access Sage, then you're getting an engagement process going on here. So I can reach out to heads of department, budget holders, you know, people, you know, maybe even in different buildings, because they are going to be accessing this via a web portal. So what we're going to do here is we're going to log in as one of my approvers, a gentleman called Corey. He's going to have a password, and you can also, by the way, attach authenticators to this login screen. So if you need to have additional levels of security, so this might be a need to generate a 6-digit number, for example, which is exactly what we do, by the way, here at Sicon, then that code needs to go in as well as their login and password. You can, if you wish, associate this to Windows authentication, so we can verify that the user of the web portal here is also a known entity on your Windows user server user list. Okay, so I'm going to log in here. Oh, excuse me, must have got part of that password wrong. Let me just try that again. That's better. Okay, now for me on my demo environment, Corey has a number of different roles and responsibilities, as you can see from his dashboard. Okay, so quite often we see people wanting to buy into what we call requisition. Okay, so this is where somebody in the organization wants to buy something, but it needs to go in front of somebody to be approved in order to become a purchase order. Okay, so that's what that aspect means. But today we're obviously, as I say, focusing our energy on invoice approval. So Corey, as you can see there, he's got quite a number of transactions, clearly not really been paying much attention to it. And what you need to be aware of as well is that this approval system can send reminder notifications to people if they don't actually fulfill their obligations, in this instance of approving invoices, in what you might consider to be a timely manner. So it could be once a day, once every 2 days, it could be once a week, but either way, if the system detects that there are invoices that haven't been attended to, then it will ping out these reminders. They already get an initial notification, and again the timing of those notifications. So once activity hits the Sage system, you might want to say, okay, once an hour, ping out a notification, you've got invoices to approve. So when they can click on a link, by the way, in that email, and it will take them to the login screen, but it will not take them into the screen you're looking at with me, because we want to make sure that they are securely logging in. Okay, so the most recent invoices that you saw me place onto Sage via automation are actually shown here. So the Falcon account and the Kitchen Builders account. If I hover over the thumbnail button, I get a reveal that just tells me principally what it is. If I click on the arrowhead, however, I then get shown the graphic, so I can get a full clear understanding as to what this transaction is for. I can see which nominal account it was headlined to be posted to. If you're using Sage Project Accounting or projects from Sicon, then you'll also get a reveal here about where that's going to be connected to. Now, typically, and I'm not saying this is always the case, but typically it's a binary decision. Okay, so green for approve, red for reject. On my demo system, I've also given Corey the ability to edit the analysis, and by that I mean the nominal and potentially the project. Okay, some people aren't necessarily happy with that concept, so what reject might mean is that there's something wrong with the analysis, but it needs to go to someone who can then edit it, and that's what we call a rejection workflow user. Okay, so what they would see on their screen is not necessarily a list of invoices that require approval, but they will see invoices that require attention because they've been rejected. But if somebody clicks on a reject, they have to type in a reason, and they can be as brief or verbose with that explanation as they want, but the rejection workflow user will see that reason. So if the call to action is it's on the wrong cost center, it's on the wrong project, it should be on this, it should be on the other, then they can actually edit the transaction. Okay, and then it will go back to the original approver for them to sign off, because they will then have the ability to judge that change, and if they're happy with it, then they can approve it. Okay, so let's do that. Now let's look at this Kitchen Builders one. I'll just show you a few other options that you can do. I'm looking at this as the approver, and I'm thinking to myself, I wonder, I'm going to check to make sure that we have had the benefit of whatever the charge for the services is for, let's say a training course, provision of some equipment, etc. So I might want to do, let's say, a quality check. Okay, so I'm going to type in here what process I'm undertaking, and then I'm going to put it on hold. Okay, so I'm neither approving it or rejecting it, but when I click it on hold, this is something you don't have to necessarily do, but I think it's quite useful. We can now ping an email to the relevant person at the organization that sent me that invoice. So if you've got contact records in your purchase ledger record on Sage, then we can then send, as you can see, to there, we can do a little mail merge here, and what you want to say and what the wording is entirely down to you, but this is just an example. So we're notifying them that the invoice is on hold, we're telling them which invoice number it is, and we're telling them why. Okay, so that means that when I come back into my screen a little later, and you can see that you can clearly see, shall I say, clearly see which invoices are on hold because we're going to tick them. Okay, but then I can go back into that transaction. I can say, yep, I'm happy with that. I'm going to unhold it. We can then send another email to that supplier contact, and we can say, yep, your invoice is no longer on hold. Okay, which then means, of course, that I can approve it. Okay, so let's do that as well. Okay. Now, here's another useful thing. If Corey goes on holiday or he goes on sick, then either he, if he's in a position to, or an admin user can step onto his record, okay, and him or they can turn his out of office on. So very similar to what you and I probably do already in Outlook when we're not in or we're away. And what can happen here, look, we can then choose from a list of appointed alternatives users that can carry on that role of approving, rejecting, etc. on behalf of the original approver. So in my case, it's a lady called Suzanne. Okay. What that means is that Suzanne will get Corey's traffic along with her own, okay, but then she will also be notified that she's going to be actioning Corey's transactions, okay, because in the background of this system, there is effectively like an audit log. And what that's doing is it's saying who approved what and when and on which date, who rejected what and when and why, who approved on behalf of, who rejected on behalf of, and why. So independently, because this is sitting outside of Sage, we just feel we're duty bound to basically give you an account of who did what and when, okay, because that might be important for you to go back and track on something. Okay, so when Corey comes back from his holiday or his sick leave, he turns his out of office off. Anything that's sat in Suzanne's list view, which she's not got around to dealing with, despite getting those reminders that I talked about, the system will move the activity that's relevant for Corey back into his list view, literally touch of a key, it moves it back automatically, and then she can just carry on where he can carry on, shall I say, where she left off. Another thing I want to point out is that you can do everything you've seen me do so far, okay, on a mobile phone, okay. It works on either Android or iOS. All you need to do is click your particular device, open the camera, scan this QR code here. That'll give you a prompt to a link to download it from our App Store. When you first launch the app, it will open up the camera and it will tell you to scan the QR code on your endpoint address. Now your phone is tethered to the web portal. Okay, so the two can then work in sync. Now that's extremely useful if you've got people out of office. They're working, but they're not in a position to access a a web portal, or they're not in a zone for Wi-Fi, but they can get 4 or 5G, so they can then do the approval, rejection, etc. on a handheld device. Okay, so again, that just keeps everybody in the loop. They would obviously need to probably have email coming through to their phone as well, just so they get those reminders or those notifications that they've got things to do. But actually being able to engage with the portal via the mobile, I think, is kind of really useful. Okay, let's pop out from Corey, just log off from him for the moment, and let's go back into Sage so I can show you the evidence of what's actually happened. So if we go back into the Falcon account, just as an example, because we approved that invoice earlier on, then that U flag, as I say, has now been cleared. When, by the way, one thing you do need to know, when we put an invoice on query, let me just pop into the nominal for a second. What we do is we code everything to the relevant VAT and creditors control account, but we actually push the net into a temporary accrual account whilst we're waiting for the invoice to be approved. Now, the reason we do that, of course, is that that invoice might be rejected, okay? In which case it needs to be removed off your Sage record with a reverse transaction entry, okay? Or it could, of course, be posted to a different nominal account than the one that it was originally presented to the approver on. So it makes sense for us to hold it in here, okay, just provisionally. And then when it gets approved, if I show you this example, we take it out of this accrual account. That, by the way, can be a targeted nominal of your preference. And then we move it, as you can see, to the nominal that it was either originally earmarked to go to, or which the approver changed it to go to, or a rejection workflow user edited it to go to, but that's where it now subsequently sits. Okay. A couple of points more for me to finish before we open up for questions. I mentioned something about another aspect to Sicon Documents, and this is what we call document distribution. Okay, doesn't have to be engaged with. You may have other things that you use in preference, but if I just open my Outlook account for a minute on my demo environment, what you can actually do is you can identify outward facing media that you might send to customers and or suppliers. So I'm thinking here invoices, statements, remittance advices, that kind of thing. Okay, I'm just going to pop onto my drafts to give you a heads up on that. So when I send, for example, a PO out to a supplier, what I can actually do is orchestrate the design of that. So if I just pull that up to the screen, show you, and I can customize the whole view of that. So I can front load, for example, as you can see here, a graphic that represents my company. Behind that, we then tailor the design of the PO or the sales order or the statement or the remittance, okay? And then I can say, when I send a purchase order out, I want the system to attach another PDF or a Word document or an Excel document or whatever else I want to put there, because I might need to notify either the customer or the supplier, in this case, what my terms and conditions of contract are. Okay, so I might not have those embedded into the actual PO document, but I can get document distribution to automatically attach it so that when I send that email, it's going with everything I need them to have complete visibility of. The other thing I can do, which I think is quite nice, is that if I'm buying a stock record, I might want to show the person what the thing should look like that I'm buying. So what this does is it looks at your stock records in Sage, and if you're holding images, which you're entitled to do, then we can attach those images automatically to reflect everything that is inside your purchase order. Okay, so it's quite a nifty thing to be able to do. As I say, you don't have to use it. It does come part of documents anyway, so it's there if you want to engage with it. It might be something that you evolve into as things go on. The final point I just want to talk about in the case of invoice approval, and I'm just going to go back into Sage to quickly make a reference to it, is when you come to do your payment run, okay, and again, you don't have to use this, but it is in the product set. If you go into your period end routines and you want to do payment runs, okay, and you generate the payment run, what you can do is you can switch on something which we call payment approval, okay? And what this means is it's not notifying an approver to clear an invoice, it's actually notifying potentially one or more approvers who are required to authorize the completion of a payment run. So they're going to see a list of payments, okay, and they're going to sanction that payment to be actioned. Now, whilst you're waiting for that to happen, you won't be able to generate the payments, in other words, the remittance advices and the backs file, until they have sanctioned that run. So let me just show you what they can see. We're going to go into the lady I made reference to earlier on, Suzanne. Okay. And again, she's going to log in with her ID and password, and what she will have is a proposed payment tab on her dashboard. Okay, so when she clicks into that, she can then see the values of the remittances that are due to be processed, but she can also, if I go on to let's think of a smaller one, I think this one here should be, I need a small one, I don't want to pull up a great big remittance. Let's have a look at this one here. No, not a very good example. There's not a lot linked. Just give me a second. There you go. So because you're using documents and/or automation, then alongside each transaction will be the invoice image. So she can then do an exact check to make sure that the values that are on the lines can actually be corresponded to the original image. So nobody needs to print things off or attach them to a report. She can actually look at this suggested payment file and verify that what's on it is what it says on the screen. Okay, and then she can make a decision as to whether she wants to either approve individual invoices, in other words, countermand the suggested payment run, or clearly approve everything that is destined to go to that particular supplier, or approve the entire run. Okay, and different payment approvers can be given different ceiling limits as to what their authority allows them to approve. So we're okay if we're talking, a small, several thousand invoice, but if we come across one that, say, I don't know, 20, 30,000, then a notification might need to go to a higher authority approver for them to actually make a judgment call on whether it's okay for that particular payment level for that particular supplier to be endorsed so it can go out the door. Okay, so it's not something you necessarily may get into straight away, but it is an option in there. You're not paying any extra for it. It's just functionality that's built into the invoice approval system. Okay, so let's pop out from there, and that, just for the purposes of time that we have available on this webinar this morning, is my presentation completed. So feel free to unmute, ask any questions, or pop them into the chat, and I'll do my level best to provide you with some answers. But hopefully you found that useful, insightful, and I'll hand back to Darren and yourselves if you've got any further questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. Absolutely wonderful as usual. Obviously, this is an overview of the two solutions, really, or three solutions actually.
Yeah.
In this case. And sometimes the devil's in the details. So feel free to ask any questions. If you don't have any right now, you can email me, which should have been on the link that I sent out this morning, and I'll come back to you with answers as and when. But I'll just hold on for a second, see if there are any questions, if you want to unmute.
Or if you'd like to book in a private demo, then again, get in touch with Darren and we can arrange that on a mutually convenient day and time. And we can probably use it to go into anything else that you might have seen that caught your attention as well. Or as I say, if you'd just like to have your own private review of that solution so you can see it in a bit more depth, then we can arrange a session individually with yourselves.
Okay, I mean, there are a couple of things that we didn't sort of talk about. So with document automation, the minimum, so Chris has talked about Sicon Documents, the minimum amount of licenses that you need is one. So you need a scan and view license, that's it. Right. And then you need to purchase a bundle of documents, basically, and they're priced at various levels, starting at, I think, 1,000 all the way up to
that's right,
100,000 or whatever.
The
more you have, the cheaper it gets. and they don't expire. So generally, when we talk to our clients about, how many should you have, we'll suggest that you look at how many purchase invoices you would get in from your suppliers over the period of, say, a year, and that's the bundle that you go for. If you use them up before the year's up, then you buy another bundle. If you don't use them up within that time, then you buy them as and when you use all of them up, and it's one document per
scan.
Per scan, basically.
Yes, right. Doesn't matter to us how many pages long it might be. All we see it as is a document. And one of the reasons we like to know the size of bundle that you're intending to consume is that when it gets set up, there's a point in the setting where we can say, what level do you want it to reach before we bring up a reminder to tell you that your bundle is nearly due to expire? So if you bought a 10,000 document bundle, for example, why not put a little level reminder at, say, 250? So when we hit that 250 mark, we can flash a prompt up onto the top of your Sage screen that you're in, and it will say you've now reached your document bundle reorder level. So now you can then, when appropriate, get on the phone, speak to Darren and the team at EBS, and renew your bundle to whatever level you now want it to be. But quite a lot of people do buy bigger bundles, knowing that there's no time expiry, which is quite common in some of these solutions. There's no time expiry, so it means that they're getting a better price per document, but the bundle might last them 18 months, 2 years before they have to renew it again.
Indeed.
Okay, I think we're only a minute or two over the planned hour session, but as I say, hopefully that's been of use and benefit to you. So thanks very much for staying with me and allowing me to give you that tour round. Darren, over to you to close off, but thank you very much indeed, and from me, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Chris, and feel free, as I said, to drop me a line if needs be, to address any particular queries you might have additionally to those that you've asked today. We'll be happy to hear from you. And with definitely. That, as I say, thank you very much.
Yeah,
we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Cheers, everybody.
Take care.